The best known story from 1 Samuel, and certainly one of the best known stories from the whole Bible, is found in our reading today. It's the story of David and Goliath, and we're going to read a little part of the story from 1 Samuel chapter 17, and it's verses 45 and 46. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest to me with a sword and with a spear and with a shield, but I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day will the Lord deliver thee into mine hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give the carcasses of the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, that all the earth may know that there is a God in Israel. One of the outstanding features of King Saul, and perhaps the one that most appealed to the Israelites when they were wanting a king, was the fact that from his shoulders and upward he was higher than any of the people, and we read that in chapter 9 verse 2. Saul himself was actually quite an imposing character, but when it came to fighting the Philistine champion Goliath, he was as fearful as the rest of the nation. For 40 days the giant issued a challenge to Israel, and when Saul and all Israel heard those words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Verse 11 of the chapter. So much for the hope of the nation, that our king may go out before us and fight our battles. Chapter 8 verse 20. David's 3 brothers were in Saul's army, anxious to hear how they were doing and how the battle was going. Jesse, David's father, sent his youngest son with supplies for the soldiers, corn, bread and cheese, verses 17 and 18 of the chapter. After he delivered the provisions, David met with his brothers, and as they were talking, Goliath came out again with his defiant challenge. I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. Verse 10. Now you can understand why the Israelites were afraid when they heard the giant's cry. When they saw the imposing stature of Goliath, he was over 9 feet tall, the weapons that he carried and the armor that he wore, they saw themselves as feeble and vulnerable, and so indeed they were. But whenever David heard the giant's cry, his picture of the scene was actually quite different. He remembered what both the Philistine army and the Israelite army had forgotten. In verse 26 he asked this question, Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? It was the fact that David saw God in the situation that led him to go against the giant. It was the fact that he had had experiences with God when he protected his sheep from a lion and a bear. We read that in verse 37. That meant he knew that God was greater than this situation. And it was his faith in God that put these words in his mouth in the face of the taunts and insults of Goliath. I come to thee in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. We read that in verse 45. It was a man called Jack Hunter that I first heard made this comment over 40 years ago. One man with God is a majority. One man with God must win. When we see the circumstances greater than our God, we fear, and well we might. But when we see our God as greater than the circumstances, we can fight in his strength. Let's never forget that it is the name of the Lord that is a strong tower. The righteous runneth into it and is safe. Psalm 18 verse 10. Let us live in such a way that people around us might know that there is a God in heaven.